Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I've got a variety of delicious foods set up to take care of a couple of my worm bins. The worm bins I wanted to check in on today are the two oldest systems that are still actively composting. I came down with information about them, but I accidentally hit the reset button and I wiped the board clean of the information I was going to share with you, but I think I can remember good bits of it. So now the older of the two bins is the one that's right up here. It's now 48 weeks of age. That's 336 days. And the one right below it, that's my so-called original worms. And that system's only been in service maybe 2.5 weeks less. It came online just a couple weeks later. So they've been butted up as kind of sister bins or buddy bins for many feedings now. And over many feedings lately, we've been just looking at the material in these boxes thinking, you know, it's time to get the worms out of there, harvest those beautiful castings, and get the little guys working on something a little bit more substantial. So we're going to get that process started today. So starting today, no more composting, but the feeding is going to be geared for migration. So we're phasing out of composting mode and getting into the transition phase, trying to move the worms out of their finished castings, lure them into the baiting area, into the horizontal migration feeding zone. So that's what we're going to try to get taken care of today with these two systems. Let's get to work. So now this piece of cardboard that was pretty much just doing nothing more than basically providing shade for the younger system, it's finally getting upgraded to have a real purpose now. And it's just a little something I like to do to try to keep the nice clean finished castings clean. Just putting up a little sort of partition so that I can set up my horizontal migration feeding zone on one side of it and leave the nice finished worm castings protected from any sort of stuff that could soil them. So these top covering plastics will go back after we set up the horizontal migration feeding zone. These papers though, I bought along a couple replacement top coverings. Not quite as big as the old ones. I thought that those old ones would be really handy using this material now that it's nice and seasoned, sitting in the worm bin for the past 11 days since we last fed. This is nice seasoned bedding type material that I think the worms are going to appreciate having their horizontal migration feeding zone built out of. But I mean, look at that material. Isn't that beautiful? It definitely shows that the worms have been roaming the top surface, coming up to check out the moisture collecting on this piece of paper. Paper not showing a whole lot of signs of wear yet though. Man, look at that stuff. Alright, so yeah, I thought that this stuff might come in really useful when it comes time to build up the horizontal migration feeding zones. I've got some other material too that could be used for that as well. So let's just set these aside and then we could set up the migration zones. So my idea was to put the migration zones on that side. The last place we fed was down here. So my thought was maybe just emptying all this finished castings from this edge, piling it up on this far side, and then all the worms, a lot of the worms at least, are probably going to be hanging out down the middle, eating the leftovers of the most recent feeding. So, you know, before we cover everything up over here, let's just check this stuff out here. I figured maybe a good quick till, loosen all the material up a little bit, maybe get the worms moving a little if they've just been getting a little bit lackadaisical, relaxing in the same spot. Maybe me coming in with this little bit of a rough handling will get the worms a little bit excited, get them moving around a little bit, maybe try to find themselves a different place to be. So now this will cover up, I guess, with the stuff on the far end. And then presumably this middle section that we didn't really disturb too much yet, that might be a spot where we'll find even more worms because that was the place that was last fed. Now the horizontal migration feeding zone I was thinking of putting together for these little guys probably doesn't have to be too big. I mean, I've got plenty of prepared bedding we could use for that. We've got those top covering newspapers that we just decommissioned that we could use for that. Let's see. We've even got a variety of other things that we could use. So I've got stuff that we could build out with. I just feel a little, I don't know, uneasy piling things quite this high up on this opposite edge over here. I'm definitely stacked up high. And I guess I could even go up a little bit higher than normal here temporarily until we get the feeding zone established, and then we can return some of it back down lower without it resting so high up here. But we've got one of the bins, the older of the two, now excavated for the most part. Let's go ahead and do the same for the other one. But before we cover up out on this edge, we'll do the same thing, just aerate. This stuff definitely is really far along. Very, very mature castings. These systems probably could have been harvested quite some time ago, but we just kept this, we just kept pushing the envelope, going longer and longer with these systems. And maybe some of this stuff is already getting to the point where it's even a little bit overworked. And I think that's just the result of the worms eventually eating the same castings repeatedly a number of times, where the consistency of this stuff gets kind of finer and finer over time, more likely to get clumpy and everything like that, a little bit more muddy. So that might be what we're starting to see the signs of here. I'm even questioning whether I would want to be as thorough as I had been in the past with the top covering. Maybe the top coverings could even get replaced in such a way that would allow for a little bit of this moisture to exit the system. Maybe. So I think we're pretty much set here to establish the horizontal migration feeding zones of these two systems. So where's these fancy schmancy partitions I created? Let's see here. We can kind of turn up the ends since they are perhaps a little wider than they need to be. We can definitely provide them with a nice spacious area. I don't know if it's that important or necessary, but it looks like we could easily do it. And then at least we would feel like they've got plenty of real estate to settle into on the other side instead of being crammed in there. But once they see all those delicious foods and stuff that I've got for them over there, that's going to be irresistible, I believe. So let's see, let's give each horizontal migration feeding zone a cardboard tube. I thought that these large pieces of paper could even continue to add yet more protection on the very edge to keep any sort of debris from entering the castings. And just as I say that, I litter the nice finished castings with a piece of cardboard. So that's kind of what I thought we could use some of this stuff for. Let's split it up fairly. This stuff is all dry. I better get my hose out here and get this stuff moistened up a bit. And where's my prepared bedding? Oh, I've got some of this here too. We're going to give them all kinds of goodies. Here we go. My prepared bedding is just been replenished a couple days ago. Let's see. This is still the old stuff before I did the replenishment, so we can go for some of that more seasoned stuff. Let's see how one handful of that looks if it's sprinkled in here. It looks pretty good. I think we're going to kind of push this whole thing back a bit after we've set it all up. Alright. Looks pretty good, but before we put the foods in, why don't we grab my hose. Luckily it's right here on standby, and I believe it's already got pressure in it as well, which is good. It shouldn't take too much to get this dry paper moistened. Actually, the prepared bedding on top here is already pre-moistened. Maybe I should have moistened those large pieces of paper bag underneath first before I plopped all this stuff in. Alright, let's see if we can sneak a little bit of additional moisture in between the folds of all this dry paper, try to get this stuff all cozy and comfortable for the worms to want to hang out in. If it's dry, they're not going to want to do that, so we got to make it nice and damp and cozy for them. Okay. I think things are looking pretty good in here. It might not hurt to move some of these dry pieces around too over here as well. Get all of it soaked in with some nice moisture. Oops, okay. Losing some of my nice castings, rolling over the edge. Okay, luckily the delicious fruits and veggies that we're going to be adding are also going to bring with them a little bit of moisture. So why don't we proceed to getting that stuff in here now. Let's see. I've got a frozen banana, broken two ways, one for each system. Now everything down here, let's see if we can split this up kind of 50-50 like that. And this too is, I guess, meant just to get divvied up evenly on both sides. Now it's both sides. It's actually two separate bins, but it does feel like I'm just working on one big system when I'm set up this way. I don't know why, I get a kick out of that. Nope. So let's see here. We've got a little bit of grit we can include with this feeding too. Why not? Nice little extra. Help the worms break their food down. Almost out. I'm gonna have to get some more. Now I've also got coffee, and that also means we've got feeding zone indicators. So let's get the coffee in here in both systems. Alright, and now I think we're almost at the point where we can, maybe now would be a good time, since there's a good amount of material on the other side to hold up that side. We can come in with a little bit of backfill just to try to figure out where this thing's really going to be. Then we could tell how much material we're going to need to actually fill that all in to bring things up to level. Not that it would be so important to get things up to level, but I guess I just prefer to do it that way if possible. So let's see about nudging things over here a little bit too. We'll give each system kind of an equivalent amount of space, like so. Now down here in the coffee, something I usually like to add to the coffee, a little bit of my worm chow, and I think another handful or two of the prepared bedding. At this point we might have tapped out all the more seasoned stuff. Now we're getting down into the material that I just prepared 2 days ago, maybe even just yesterday. Can't remember, but it does look like maybe another 2 handfuls is sufficient to get this more or less level up to the point where, yeah, we're kind of matching the height of the contents of the systems. And this stuff is pre-moistened. It's got some good weight to it because of the moisture, but I've got a feeling it might not hurt. Let's go with just another small handful over on this one. I think we're done. Let's go at this thing just a little bit more. With a little extra moisture, it'll give us a chance to rinse things down a little bit, clean things off, maybe get the stuff on my glove down into the worm bins rather than having it on my glove. And now, officially, we are no longer composting in this system. So yeah, I mean, the worms will come over, they'll consume this material, they're going to create vermicastings and vermicompost on this other side. But at this point, I usually just treat this feeding not so much as a feeding geared towards the production of castings and vermicompost, but more a feeding that's got the purpose of getting the worms to go from point A to point B. So that's the reason I usually kind of treat this as a transition point from one worm bin phase to another. Now, I'm thinking maybe a little bit more of this stuff sprinkled out across the top. just in case we get any worms that decide they're going to go exploring. They got a little something over there to hang out with. And this to me looks like we haven't really leveled it off yet. Let's get our feeding zone indicator in place, as if we would have a hard time finding our feeding zone. But here too, let's see about leveling things off here nicely. That's just the way I like to do it usually. And that looks really nice as well. So on with this coffee filter, and now we're off. As I mentioned earlier, I've got a couple replacements here. Those replacements that we had previously, the ones that were sort of hanging out off in all directions, those things were definitely pretty cool. Hanging out on all the sides, getting completely dampened all the way around. And you know what? Speaking of which, we never even used them as bedding as we had hoped to. But guess what? I don't think it's too late. I think we're still at a recoverable stage where we can use it as a nice top covering over the entire feeding area. I know, there's castings flying all over the place. I'm making a huge mess. But this stuff is ideal. It's perfect. It's completely familiar. It's been with the worms for the past week and a half. It brings with it its own little degree of moisture, and we could even dampen it further. But I think that right there is going to be that's going to be the icing on the cake. That's really going to make the worms want to come over. All of that nice, familiar, juicy goodness all over this piece of newspaper. In a way, it's good that we forgot about it, I think, because here it's probably going to pay off and help us a lot with getting the worms to do what we want them to do, which is to simply come on over. So let's put this final little blast of moisture onto this somewhat dry, not completely dry, but a little bit dry newspaper. Most of it is damp and nicely seasoned by having been in the worm bin, but some of it around the edges was still dry. So now I think we've taken care of that and we can really cover up. All right, well, close call, but I think it actually paid off in the end to have had those pieces of paper there to cover up with. Those should make for a really nice place for the worms to go right into and feel comfortable in, instead of it feeling like a completely sterile foreign place that they wouldn't want to adventure in. All right, so we're going to have to let this go for a while. Not sure how long it's going to take, but at some point, ideally, we're going to find that the finished castings have been evacuated of worms, and then we can harvest them out of here. All right, everyone, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.